What is the economic benefit of being in a mastermind group? Good morning. My name is Ann McNeil, and I am the Master Wealth Builder, helping to build stronger and better lives and businesses. And my question today for you is, what is the economic benefit of you being in a mastermind group? Well, this is our principle today, the mastermind principle, espoused in the book Think and Grow Rich. And as a part of the International Mastermind Association, our desire is to be the organization of accountability for mastermind groups. And a mastermind group, if you are not familiar, can be, according to Napoleon Hill, the actual driving force that I suggest can drive your bottom line to greater profit. He tells us in this principle that when you bring together two or more individuals, I like to suggest that are like-minded and like-spirited individuals, you are forming a mastermind group. Well, after years of living in this principle, I am realizing that there is, according to Napoleon Hill, a definite economic benefit by having an accountability of like-minded and like-spirited individuals who are willing to hold you accountable for your financial goals, at least. It can be goals in any area of your business or life, but also you are willing to hold them accountable. And so with that thought in mind, we have invited another phenomenal guest to share with you. But before we do that, keep in mind that power, when you think about masterminding, that power is generated from the accumulation of minds. And when you translate this into action toward a specific goal inside of a mastermind accountability group, how could you not succeed? But speaking of succeeding, I could do this podcast by myself, but not today. Not today. I am here with, yes, Dr. Peter James. Good morning, Dr. James. How are you this morning?
Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's been a little while. It's great to be back on Saturday mornings. Think and Grow Rich, and McNeil, and the power of the masterminds. And I love the intro and even correlating this power of the masterminds with our bottom lines. I really like how that sounds because there is not even a dotted line correlation, there is a straight line correlation to surrounding yourselves with the right individuals who can help you stay on that positive trajectory. And I've seen no value, nothing but value from surrounding myself with the likes of you and Galen Bingham and others who will help to sharpen my saw, for lack of a better word. So I'm excited to dive into today's conversation because I know that we have a phenomenal guest who's going to give us specific details, specific insights, maybe even his examples about what a mastermind has looked like in his life as well. This is going to be fabulous, Anne. I know it is.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just wanted to share something that Napoleon Hill shared about this economic benefit, and he basically says that the that as he explains in the principle, that there's two basic characteristics, if you will, of the mastermind principle. And one is economic in nature, and the other one is psychic. One is economic, and the other one is psychic. And he goes on to explain that the economic feature is obvious because economic advantages may be created by any person, and that's any person, who surrounds him or herself with the advice, the counsel, and personal cooperation of a group of people, and this is the key word I am learning, people who are willing to lend worthwhile, wholehearted aid in the spirit of perfect harmony. And I shared that because our special guest today, in my opinion, represents one of those individuals that I had the pleasure of meeting we were talking earlier, many years ago. And so to just give you a little bio, Dr. Rick Goodman, will you come on? Dr. Rick Goodman is a keynote speaker, author, and I'll also add coach. And in the area of leadership expert, he is an expert, I can attest to that, who has empowered thousands worldwide, known for his inspiring message. And I'll also add conversations on positive mindset, leadership skills, and communication strategies. He has recently ranked in the top 30 global gurus of leadership in 2024. Help me welcome our special guest, Dr. Rick Goodman. Good morning, Dr. Rick.
Good morning, Ann. Good morning, Peter. Thank you so much for having me here. This is a special podcast, especially to me, because the power of the mastermind has changed my life drastically. And I know it'll change anybody who's watching the podcast today.
Well, that is one of the reasons why when I talked about the economic benefit, and your face just automatically comes to mind. And we were talking earlier about how we met as a part of the National Speakers Association. I thought that was it. But then when I really went back into my memory banks, it might have been before that with Les Brown. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
years ago. And I think that one of the powers, if you want to call it psychic and also economic, in bringing like minds and like spirits together, draws other like minds and like spirits in the spirit of harmony to achieve a particular goal or goals. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, Dr. Rick, because your bio speaks volumes, but I'd like to go back. I'd like to have you take us back to your first introduction of this book and these principles.
Well, it started when I graduated from medical school, and I had a mentor. His name was Dr. Larry Markson, and he read the Laws of Success book by Napoleon Hill, which is, I call the Bible version because it's this big. And he read it every single year. And what I learned is that we call it OPE, other people's experiences. So you don't have to, if I see what somebody else has done and they're doing it, I will just emulate and do the things that they do, and you get the same stuff. It's pretty easy. So I thought if he reads this every single year and he's doing great, I'm going to read it every single year also. And in fact, when I got done, I did it with my son. And in fact, on my YouTube channel, we have the Laws of Success, the Alex Project, where I made my son read the Laws of Success, each chapter. And at the end of every chapter, he would, once he completed, he had to write a summary. And then I would do a video on it, and he would get $100 for each chapter. But here was the thing. He didn't get the money until he had summarized every single chapter and it was done. And it had to be done on a deadline. And I took myself out of the picture and put my assistant Shirley in charge because I'm dad. And literally, it changed things overnight, and we just did it again 2 years ago because my son said, "Dad, it's a little bit outdated." And now that he's a big manager in Hollywood and he represents the biggest comedians in the world, he said, "I think you need to update it and make it a little bit more modern." So, Anne, what you're doing with this principle and helping people, understand something that was written so many years ago in the 20s and 30s, that most of the people listening now weren't alive then. I call us gray hairs, know it. But now it's new information and you're bringing it to the world.
Wow, thank you so very much. I know that I see Peter's head is going up and down because the light bulb is coming on for him. Peter?
Yeah, I'm so excited to dive on into this principle and even hear a little bit more of the story of Dr. Rick for sure. But Anna, I know we have this video, this 13 principles video that kind of gives us an overview of Think and Grow Rich while we're diving deeply into the mastermind philosophy today. And those of you who are not familiar with it, please pay particular attention today because it's so important, as even Dr. Rick has started out, to identify who around us needs to be part of our tribe, for lack of a better word, and why they need to be part of our tribe, and how we can collaborate better in order to sharpen each other's saw. So as you continue to reflect on that in this conversation today, pay particular attention to also this overview of the principles. It'll mention, of course, that power of the mastermind, but let's dive on in and then even dive deeper into the conversation today. Let's give it a listen.
All right, thank you.
Number 1 is desire. Napoleon Hill said that everything starts with a burning desire, a compelling reason for doing what it is we do. Step 2 is faith, having belief in our ability to attain that which we desire. Step 3 is what we call autosuggestion. Autosuggestion simply means being very intentional about the things that we are pouring into our thoughts, into our brains, and into our consciousness. Our brains, our minds will receive everything automatically, but we have to work extra hard to make sure that the positive things are what we are feeding ourselves, because those positive thoughts are going to turn into positive actions. Step number 4 is specialized knowledge. No one person knows everything, even about whatever their particular area of expertise might be. And the value of the mastermind principle is using the specialized knowledge of other people. Step number 5 is imagination, the workshop of the mind. Everything starts with our imagination and our thoughts, the burning desire to transform those thoughts into our reality. In order to do that, we have to take a look at step 6, which is organized planning. That is how we crystallize our desire into action, organizing ourselves. Having the thought and not acting on the thought isn't going to get us anywhere. We have the thought, we go through the organized planning to transform that thought into action. Step number 7 is decision. What Napoleon Hill said is the mastery of procrastination. Napoleon Hill said that the antidote to procrastination is simply to make a decision and then move on that decision. Step 8 is persistence. We have to have a sustained effort which is induced by our faith in order to achieve our goals. One of Napoleon Hill's books I love, even the title, 3 Feet from Gold. Those people who became rich during the gold rush in the Wild Wild West days didn't do that because they were necessarily smarter or had better information than anyone else. It's because they stayed just a little bit longer. Sometimes people left when they were just literally 3 feet from gold. So hanging in there, being persistent, is step number 8. Step number 9, the power of the mastermind, the driving force. None of us can accomplish anything on our own. Everybody, I don't care who you are, from the most prominent person to the person who might be considered the lowest on the totem pole, everybody has someone who helped them get to where they are. And the power of the mastermind is being able to use those influences around us, use the thoughts, use the knowledge, use the exploration of other people to help us in achieving our goal. Step number 10, the mystery of sex transmutation. This title can be a little confusing, but essentially what the mystery of sex transmutation means is that we oftentimes in our society think of sex as being purely physical. It is absolutely physical, but what Napoleon Hill teaches us is that sex also has an emotional element, and that sex is the strongest of our desires. That if we can take our sexual energy, transform that into positive, creative influences, it can propel us to new heights. And so we spend quite a bit of time talking about the mystery of step 10, which is sex transmutation. Step number 11 is the subconscious mind, which Napoleon Hill tells us is the connecting leap between our human mind and the infinite intelligence, the source of all thought, the source of all creativity. Conscious mind, we spent some time talking about how we use that through the influence of autosuggestion and what we're feeding into our mind. Step number 12, which is the brain, the broadcasting and receiving station of thought. Final step number 13, the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom. This is the final step through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. The principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles.
All right, all right, all right. If you just joined us, we are talking about this principle of the mastermind. And Dr. Peter, I think you may have had something additional to say. I just want to just make sure. I'm excited. What can I say? Go ahead.
No, this is going to be a great conversation. I want to ask Dr. Rick on back here, and as we dive on into this mastermind. So myself, and you're part of my mastermind, even on these Saturday mornings. Galen is for sure. I talked to Galen, and we have a mastermind as well. Dr. Rick, as you come back on video and talk more about this mastermind principle and what it looks like for you, do you mind giving us a little bit of details about how it has maybe helped propel you to success there, sir?
Certainly. Got to get my video going here. It won't start. You got to start it for me, the host.
No problem at all. Let's see what we can do.
There we go. There we go.
There you go.
I got to tell you, the mastermind principle has been just a life-changing force in my life, and referred to something earlier when we were talking about Les Brown and the law of attraction. I call them welcome to my life moments. And as you start to mastermind with people, crazy things happen to you. And I tell my kids the same thing. It's a welcome to my life moment. You start to connect with other people. You start to think about it enough. And then all of a sudden, you're attracting it in a moment of time. But it's really important on who you surround yourself with in that mastermind. And one of the lessons that I learned is I never want to be the smartest guy in the room or the smartest gal in the room. Because that's where you sometimes you stop learning and you turn into that person who's that consultant giving advice to everybody else versus being able to receive. So it's really important to align yourself with people where you're not the smartest in the room, but you also are able to contribute at a level that everybody else is. And every dollar I have ever earned, I could tie back to mastermind principles and immersion. And attracting people into my life as I wanted to from that principle.
Love it, love it. Do you, and here's more of the specific question. For those individuals who have never dove into this principle, never met with other individuals, one individual, what do you recommend for them to get started? Because it can be an uncomfortable conversation. You're not quite sure who to talk to. You don't want to be embarrassed, you're shy, all that kind of good stuff. What might you recommend for them as they're beginning? Like you mentioned your kids. What would you recommend for your kids to get the momentum going around this mastermind and surrounding themselves with the right individuals?
Well, we always say, so if you surround yourself the top, you'll make the amount of money as the top 5 individuals you spend the most time with. So it really goes to the people that you surround yourself, and the people that you work with are going to level up. And sometimes you've got to level up a little bit higher. So, otherwise you stop growing. And that's the most important thing. So as you start off, it's fine to start off with a mentor, a coach, and fill into that mastermind, which kind of eases you into the situation. And there's a lot of people out there that want to form masterminds and whether it's a paid mastermind or it's a free mastermind, and those are different principles too. The paid ones usually are a higher level and people are a lot more serious and generally have been doing it for a while and really understand the benefits. And the free one could be just being in associations, clubs, chambers of commerce, and it turns into that type of situation. But I think here's the one thing. If you don't ASK, you won't GET. What's the worst thing that can happen? I always say you got a 50-50 shot. And so many people have said, no way someone's going to say yes, and they've asked, and the person said yes, and then they beat themselves up for not doing it sooner. So I think one of the keys is just to ask, get people together in your own group and find out what they're doing. What, and I like to say, what do you want to, what's the most important thing in your blank? And fill in the blank. What's the most important thing in your life? What's the most important thing in your relationships? And when you find people that have that like-mindedness, that's the way to start, in connecting those dots, because people do business with people who they like or like them. You'll buy a product from a friend of yours, even if it costs a couple dollars more than a local discount place. So look at your inner circle first before you go outer.
And McNeil, he's singing your tune.
Listen, Dr. Rick Goodman, I want to go back to the introduction of these principles. Can you share with us, based upon your memory, your first mastermind group, if you will, because I go back to thinking about my first mastermind group. I didn't know what I did not know. And so I just started giving the book away to friends and asking them to read it. And, a few of us got together, didn't work that well because they really didn't read. So share with us your first experience of this principle in action, where you actually called yourselves a mastermind group.
Well, that was way back in 1988 when I graduated, and I joined this consulting company, which was a consulting company for doctors in many different states. And Dr. Alan Russo was the person who kind of headed the group up. And we would get together and talk and collaborate, and we would get together every other month, and our staffs would get together also. So it was kind of a separate with doctors and separate with staff, because they had other issues that they needed to deal with and mastermind on that level. I spoke to him almost every day, to the point where we used to kid around and say we're going to go get dishes together and pick them out, because you can't get enough knowledge from other people. And again, it goes to that OPE, that other people's experience. If someone's already doing it, see what they've done and just do the same thing. You're going to get the same results. But that mastermind went on for 4 years, and grew my practice to the largest practice in St. Louis by the time I was 27 years old. And people from around the country said, how'd you do that? Well, again, it was by being with these people, surrounding myself with them, and communicating at meetings every other month, and communicating on the phone almost daily with the people in the group to help drive us, because we all go through the same stuff. Like my daughter says, you don't know the backstory. And so everybody's going through different things, but it's usually the same stuff. And whatever someone is having a challenge with, someone else has figured it out. So if you're not in that group, you're going to be missing out on the gold, because everybody's had a different experience that you're going to go through, and they've already got the solution for you.
Wow, you just hit on something that I shared in my book entitled How to Start and Run a Successful Mastermind Group, Profitable Mastermind Group. And one of the very key areas is meeting regularly. Key. And you talked about meeting every day.
Well, I call them every single day. I wanted to be successful, and you got to chase success. And one of the lessons, I love the video, persistence. I will take persistence over talent any day of the week, because so many people stop just short of success, and they never know it. And I tell us a quick story that a friend of mine was out on a boat with his father and his father's best friend. And a wave hit the side of the boat, and his father's best friend and my friend went over the side of the boat and drowned. I got a phone call when I was speaking in Virginia, and my friend told me this story. Well, all of a sudden, I thought, there's my exit, and I turned off the exit, and I turned off the wrong exit. So I turned around and I went back, and the exits in this part of Virginia were 40 miles away. So I went all the way back, and this was before GPS or Waze or any of that stuff, and I realized I'm going the wrong direction. I turned around and went back, and I had stopped 100 yards short of my exit, but I never knew. And I saw it in retrospect. So how many of us have stopped 100 yards short of success and never knew it? And that's why I'll take that persistence, because it's like here in South Florida, when it rains, we have that torrential rain, and you see people pull over the side of the road. But I also know if I keep going another maybe 25 yards, there's no rain there. So you just keep going forward. And it's the same way. There's two types of people in this world. I always say when I'm skating down the boardwalk, there's people that just freeze like a deer in a headlight, they can't move. And there's other people that jump out of the way. So it's about how we respond to situations that's going to make the big difference, and that persistency in continuing to do it, because it doesn't happen in the first mastermind. It doesn't happen the second. Sometimes it takes months, and all of a sudden, boom, the ideas come out, and next thing you know, you have just leveled up and you're going in a trajectory that you couldn't imagine.
Dr. Rick, I love how you said that, because it made me think about, and I appreciate the fact that you said, sometimes it takes weeks, months, sometimes even years. When you're in the middle of this, though, or even for that matter, when you're starting out, it can be painful. Maybe that's a word to use, monotonous, challenging, because you're not seeing what you want to see. And then you're having to almost be intentional about doing this again and again and again. It's almost anything in life, but of course, in this particular conversation, we're talking about meeting with others intentionally. What do you recommend? Wait, first of all, what did that look like for you as you were in the middle of that over and over again? But then again, what do you recommend for others who have started now? They've jumped in a little bit, even dipped their toe in, but it can be frustrating. What are your thoughts?
I'm a little different because I could pretty much predict when my clients will take off. And for me, it's 90 days, really, from the time we get started till the time, I see stuff happen. And it's usually even less than that. One of my clients, Purple Heart Homes, he saw me at a charity event, and they're like Habitat for Humanity, but for veterans by veterans. And after COVID, he was a little stuck and not moving forward. And I said, 90 days, this is going to be completely different. And at 60 days, what was happening was incredible. And the big difference is between your ears. And that's why we go intensive. That's why we meet every week for the first 90 days, once a week. And because it's got to be intensive. And then there's that accountability factor. And that's the biggest part of the mastermind, is we're accountable to each other. And I always say, when someone gives their name, their word, and they're going to work hard on it because it's their name, their reputation. They're not going to want to fail in front of other people. And that mastermind really holds people accountable and encourages people to get over that hump and get through it. And there's so many times when I think, I don't know if I can do this, but I always go right back to what brought me to the dance. And I know I set the goals. I know this in 90 days, this is what's going to happen. And sometimes, boom, when I'm at the most, I'm going to say, feeling bad about myself, or it's not going to happen. And all of a sudden the phone rings. And all I think about is the song in a New York Minute, Anything Can Change. And I've had keynotes, full-page keynotes 2 days before the event. I know someone got sick or canceled, but they called me. So who knows when these things are going to happen? But if you're not constantly focused, if you're not meeting with people, it's never going to happen. So you have to have that faith, confidence, and belief that this principle works. It's been working forever. And the people that do it succeed. It's so simple. It's like going on a diet. You know what you need to do. If you just count your calories, you do this, you just cut out, you're going to lose weight. It's impossible not to do it unless you have a serious metabolic condition. But how many of us just don't follow the rules? Same thing here with the mastermind, with Think and Grow Rich. All you have to do is study the principles and do that. And my new favorite book, Outwitting the Devil, where it's not getting, moving around and drifting. So once I heard the word drifting, and here's how I found out about that book. I must have had, this book was given to me 6 years ago. 6 years ago by a speaker, and it's been sitting on my desk. And then I took a webinar, and there were no less than 15 speakers on this webinar that were praising this book that was sitting on my desk. And I have a philosophy. If two or more people tell you something and neither one knows each other, you're getting a message from the universe. And here's the problem. So many of us are focused right here putting out fires that we're missing the opportunities. So I decided to drive to a speech, which was up in Tallahassee, instead of flying there, to get the audio and listen. And it was life-changing to the point where when I'm not doing something, I think I'm drifting away from my goals and focus. And what the mastermind does is it prevents you from drifting and getting too far off your goals and focus, because you've got the accountability of others saying, hey, how you doing? And your subconscious, I better get this done. I'm drifting. And just using that word in the book has really penetrated my brain. And now I'm talking about it to audiences, because so many of us, it's so easy to drift off. The power of sex transmutation, that can drift you off because it's the most powerful one. So all those little things can just get you off your goal, but the mastermind brings you back. It's kind of like horses. I always say, why do horses wear blinders in a race? And the reason why horses wear blinders, they stay focused on the finish line. Well, the goal of a coach, the goal of a mentor, the goal of a mastermind is to put those blinders on you so you stay focused on the finish line when you're starting to drift away. And that's the accountability factor.
Dr. Rick, I'm sorry, Ann, I'm just kind of captivated. Some of the you're
Go right
saying
ahead. Go right ahead.
you're saying some specific things, and I'm like, oh, this is great conversation. And I'm looking back in this Think and Grow Rich book, and I know the principle number 7, the decision principle. And I'm also thinking, as you made that analogy to losing weight, some people find it terribly hard to do so. And going back to that decision principle, is it a decision thing? Is it a discipline thing? What prevents us from staying the course from your expertise, from your experience?
A lot of it's self-sabotage.
Mhm.
And it goes back to self-awareness, self-sabotage, how we feel about ourselves. And again, that's the goal, putting people together, because we all have those fears. I said this the other day to somebody, and he said, fear, false evidence appearing real. He said, could you say that again? And it was just working on this person's head, because he was so talented that he didn't even know how talented he was. So it was really about putting it together so he could see and then say, wow, this is me. I said, yeah, that's you. You're pretty brilliant. But most people don't kind of feel that way about themselves. So it's really that one, self-awareness, the self-image, how you see yourself. Okay. And that's why it's so important to surround yourself with other people that'll tell you whether you're doing great or whether you're not doing great. Again, why? Keep you focused on that goal. And I find that's the biggest challenge with most of my CEO clients is self-awareness. And they're not aware of how they're being or how they're drifting off or who they're surrounding themselves with. And it seems simple because there's 3 phases, I say. The first phase is all about me. You're thinking about yourself. Phase 2 is you're kind of butting heads. And phase 3 is when you get up in a helicopter and you can look down and see it. So the example I use is when there was an earthquake in Haiti. Phase 1 is everybody said they need food, supplies, clothing, and they threw all the food, supplies, and clothing. Phase 2, all of it was sitting at the airport. And they didn't know what to do with it, so they were arguing. And then President Obama sent in the Marines in helicopters where they could look down and see where people needed it, and they got the stuff distributed. Well, if we can get ourselves up in that helicopter and look down on things are going to be much easier, and it takes away the stress. And that's what that mastermind group helps you to do, is get you up in a helicopter, get you out of yourself.
Good stuff there. And I had some great questions there, and I wanted to hear it from the master of masterminds, it seems like. Going back to you there, Ann.
Well, I want to go back, Dr. Rick, to something you shared about your son and updating I think you call it, I wrote notes here, the Alex
Laws of
Project.
Success, the Alex Project.
Yes, yes, yes. Now, when your son started that process, how old was he?
He was 16.
And how old is he now?
33.
I just wanted to make that perspective, because we do have a youth mastermind that meets every Sunday. And when you shared that, I thought about how many of our youth started reading this book in elementary school.
Wow.
And that, yes, 2 pages a week on a Sunday. I mastermind with them, and we have other adults that do the same. And now many of them are not only grown, but now they have children who are in the mastermind. I want to say that again. Now we have children who started with us in the 80s and the 90s who now have children, and their children are in the mastermind group. So when you mentioned your son, I thought that was an ideal example of what, and I think it's what, 15 or 16 years for him now that he's an adult. But it is so deeply embedded in him until now he's coming back to you saying, hey, look, we need to maybe update this.
Absolutely. Because he recognized that, times have changed and we've got to communicate differently to different people so they get the principles. But Anne, you are a blessing to people. I mean, what you do is so amazing. And here's the interesting part in the Outwitting the Devil book is basically this was written in 1938 and wasn't released until I think 2009 because Napoleon Hill was afraid that, he might get arrested for these principles. But one of the major principles he talked about is schools and how the schools, just teach kids rote memory to memorize stuff to pass a test, but they don't teach them how to apply the knowledge. And that's what Think and Grow Rich does. That's what mastermind groups do. It teaches you how to apply the knowledge because you could be the smartest person in the world, but if you can't apply that knowledge to help people or help yourself, your family, it's worthless. You could go on a game show and maybe win a prize, but you're not going to be able to make changes in the world. So what you're doing, Ann, is so tremendous. And again, I learned it from my mentor. I didn't see this stuff until I was 24 years old. And when I saw it, I said, my kids are going to be my experiment. I'm going to use everything that I've learned on my kids and see what happened. And last week, my daughter got married and I came up with my ex-wife on stage and I said, you know what? With a family that's not, that's divorced and stuff, it could go either one of two ways. It could be really, really bad, or it could go really, really good. And I said to her, we did really, really good because it was the experiment. And both of them, my kids, my daughter produces comedy shows and rock concerts. She's written a book with me. Well, we've been on a Today show where she gives kids other advice on, when your parents are annoying, hang in there, you may learn something. And it's, there's Jamie's Gems and Rick's Revelations and stuff. And who knew it? I would write a book with my daughter, travel the world with her at 16, where I took away her cell phone and she had to actually talk to me. And we're so close now that we talk every day. So it was really a game changer in educating my kids on what's important, putting the effort in, sharing the lessons, and then letting them see that now they're having welcome to my life moments all the time. And now I kind of kid them because I tell them in advance, this is a welcome to my life moment. You see what's happening, because if you don't know it, how do you know it? And like you said, Ann, sometimes not knowing is the best thing because we don't know what we can do. And as we get older, this fear balls up that we didn't have before. And now we stop being persistent, or we get scared and we think too much as opposed to taking action. So if we could just get that inner child back in us, that person that was, 20 years old and didn't know that they couldn't, then we'll really be successful.
It's interesting you brought up your daughter because I lived through a lot of that with you. And I was going to ask you before the show was over, how is she doing? Because I do remember many of those years and her coming to NSA as a youth. And like many of the NSA youth who are part of that organization. So I really do want to make sure that we mention the benefits of organizations and civic involvement, like the National Speakers Association, like Black NSA speakers, and like many of the other organizations that have come out of that, because I think you can attest to we're talking just before the podcast started about sound vision, for example. Sound wisdom, and how now they're publishing your book, they're publishing all of the books from NSA, and also, not NSA, but the Napoleon Hill Foundation and Institute. And so I'm just excited to hear the update on both of your children and how this principle and these books have impacted them positively. And for those of you that's listening, please consider getting copies of, he's mentioned 2 or 3 books, The Laws of Success, Outwitting the Devil, definitely Think and Grow Rich. But there are so many others. What I'm reading right now is Master Key System, the Master Key System. And it is the foundation that Napoleon Hill talks about in his, yes, Master Key to Riches. Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
But you know, something funny, Anne, when you say you want to see how the kids are doing, my daughter built her own house at 26 years old. Because of the laws of success, because of the principles, she saved $60,000 babysitting. $60,000 babysitting. And then she had to put it out on Facebook because I built my house at 27. So now it's kind of a competition. So when my kid's like a dad, you know, and I'm like, boom, global guru, 4th year in a row, you know, now tell me something. So, you know, and I have to keep up. So that's one of the things is the learning doesn't stop because how can I communicate to another generation if I don't understand them, how they communicate, what they're doing? So it's really important if we're going to have an impact is that we know our audience and we know who we're communicating to. And it's funny you talk about the National Speakers Association because I was walking back from the beach just yesterday and I was wearing my High Point University hat. And Dr. Nito Cobain, the president of High Point University, is a good friend of Ann and I. And this kid says, "Hey, go Panthers." And he turned out to be a student from High Point University. So, of course, I said that because I wear these hats all over. And Dr. Nito, right before the show, sends me something, said, "Send me your best address so he can send me more hats so I can work out." And I always promote that university. And because I always say if a motivational speaker and one of the best business people in the world would put together a college, that's what it would be. And why? Because one time I said, you know, Dr. Nito, I said, someone was looking at going to a state school. And he said, Dr. Goodman, this is a life skills university.
Exactly.
And that's what we need to be teaching. And that's what Napoleon Hill taught was life skills. It's about how are we going to do, you know, how are we going to enjoy our life? You know, how are we going to be productive and happy and not just go to work, come home, pay our bills and be done with it? How are we going to make a difference like the two of you are making a difference in people's lives by doing this? Because every single person who goes through this program and reads Think and Grow Rich, it's going to change their life. All they have to do is apply the principles and take action.
Exactly. It's interesting you mentioned Dr. Nito Cobain. I'm reading one of his books entitled Extraordinary Transformation. And it is a story, yes, of how he has become the #1 university in so many areas. And when you go there and visit, it is just life
Disney. It's like Disneyland for education.
Excellent example. Excellent, excellent. And for those of you that's just joined us, I do want to mention that we're talking with Dr. Rick Goodman, keynote speaker, author, leadership expert, but he also has delivered over 2,000 presentations across the United States, all 50 states, and guess what? Yes, 32 countries. He's the author of the bestsellers, The Solutions-Oriented Leader and Living a Championship Life. His programs focus on building strong relationships, effective communication, and a positive mindset. And you can tell just from listening to him on this podcast, it is an phenomenal opportunity for any corporation or organization or individual to have him as an expert, coach, or consultant. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We are on the upside of wrapping up. Yes, where did the time go? Peter, Dr. Rick, it's almost top of the hour. But before we go there, I just want to make sure we acknowledge those of you that's listening in and joining us in the studio and on YouTube. You know who you are, and you know I always get in trouble every time I start calling names because I might forget somebody. But let me just give a shout out to Shannon, Diane, Doretha, Imelda, Anika Arnold, and so many others that are listening in. We want to thank you. Every week we bring you phenomenal guests sharing their experiences on one or some or many of these principles. And I think one of the things that you've done for me today, Dr. Rick, is that you've tied many of the principles together and you've put a nice bow on it to help us understand the video we played, which is to just suggest that they all connect together. They all connect together. And as we prepare to wrap up, if you can share with us any particular product or service or an event you're hosting so that our listeners can connect with you.
Sure. And as you were saying, you're mentioning the book. So the solutions oriented leader, and then we have Living a Championship Life, a game plan for success. And this was actually written years ago in 2009 when I was one of the team physicians for the St. Louis Rams when they went from worst to first and won the Super Bowl. So I tied into business principles. And when my publisher saw the book, he said, "This is an amazing book." He said, "You just got to take out the Palm Pilot and the BlackBerry and update it." Because all the principles are the same: goal setting, time management, but I tie it into the sports principles and what I saw with the Miami Heat, with the St. Louis Ambush, which is also the major indoor soccer league champions, and with the St. Louis Rams, and how they use these principles in order to become champions. So, it's a great book. And the other thing that we have is our business accelerator and discovery day. So like I was saying, we'll go in and if we go into a business, we'll do a discovery day, lay out their principles, marketing, everything that they need to have done in order to grow their business. And then we put them through the business accelerator, the 90-day business accelerator, where when we do that, people grow. And usually it's between 60 to 90 days, depending on how much effort and time they put in, but usually it's before that. And everybody always said needs a coach. Messi, the great soccer player, has a coach. Beckham had a coach. All these people. Why? Because you can't do it by yourself. So whether you're in a mastermind, you're sharing with other people, you need to make sure that you surround yourself with people that are going to help lift you up and grow. And if you find that you're in the wrong group, then get out. I'll tell you one quick story is I went to a paid mastermind, and I went the first day, and like I said before, I was the smartest guy in the room, and everybody was asking me because I had internet companies that were doing continuing education, and I was selling and doing stuff like this digital in 2002 when people just kind of started catching up. And I went home, and I remember I said to my wife, I said, I feel like I'm completely wasting my time because I'm not getting anything out of it. Everybody's asking me for advice and stuff. So she said to me, the smart thing, why don't you go and tell the organizers of the mastermind, you paid a lot of money for this, you need to get something out of it. And that's exactly what I did. And they put me in a room with some of the smartest people you could imagine, a lot of friends of Ann and I, like Barry Banter and Ford Sakes, and just some of the top people. And I was not even close to being the smartest guy in that room, but I grew from being in that room. So if you're in the wrong group, go and join another group. Don't waste your time hoping it's going to get better, because the principle is that everybody grows together. It's like a step-up battery. When you put two people in, it's like a 4 battery. You put 4, it's like an 8. So that's what the mastermind does. But if you are not feeling it and you don't have the faith, confidence, and belief in that group, you're not going to be successful in that group. So there's nothing wrong with changing groups, being members of multiple groups, but certainly if it's a paid group, you've got to make sure that you're in that right paid group, that you're aligned with the people, or you're going to be wasting your money.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Dr. Peter, we can start landing this plane. We're going to share with all of you, Dr. Rick, I shared earlier about the International Mastermind Association. So on an annual basis, we host an annual meeting for your life. And this annual meeting for your life is normally the first weekend or first or second weekend in the year in January. This January 2025, we're hosting it on the 3rd and 4th of 2025. We start on the Friday night, just sharing, some wins, if you will. I call it an open mic. But then on Saturday, Dr. Rick, we all come together, including children. And it's not a conference. Let me keep saying that. It's not a conference. It's actually a meeting. And I like to compare it to an annual meeting that's held by corporation is publicly traded, where they do the annual meeting and you go through your earnings. How did the corporation do? Will you reinvest? Well, I like to encourage our attendees, before you come, consider doing an annual meeting for your life, where you look at 10 areas of your life, starting with your spiritual, your family, your health, your education, your financial, your recreation, your business, creativity, civic, and a few others. But as you do that, write goals for 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And for some of us, we're in our 40+ year doing this. And we come together and we bring our life in writing. And this is the mastermind of masterminds, if you will. And so my goal and desire, my vision is taking these small mastermind groups and have them be accountable to a larger organization. So I'm gonna say it again. We take the small mastermind groups, and we created this International Mastermind Association, where these small groups are accountable to a larger organization for the group goals and the individual goals. And we provide a place and a space for people to come and bring your life in writing. And it has been life-changing. So for those of you that's listening, please, you can go to the International Masterminders with an S.com, International Masterminders with an S.com, and you can register there. Seats are limited. As a matter of fact, we had a meeting this week and we realized that not only are the seats limited, but the investment is going up. Yes, and Rick, you know how that goes. The investment goes up when you wait to the last minute. And so it is, I think, life-changing. So we want to encourage all of you, if you're interested in having a better quality life with your family, especially, consider investing some time, talents, and treasure in yourself and joining us on January 3rd and 4th, 2025.
You know what's interesting, Ann?
Go ahead.
People spend more time planning their next holiday party than they do their life. They got to have enough food, enough booze, all this stuff, and they don't take the time to plan their life. The most important thing, it blows my mind. And what you're doing with this is getting them to plan their life. What a concept. It's like, would you just drive to California and go west? You need a map. You need direction, you know?
Yes.
But people don't plan. And and you know what? The people that do, that maybe it used to be 10%, I'm gonna say it's less than that, are the most successful people on the planet. And everybody wonders how these people get all these things. Simple. They planned, they wrote their goals, they read them every day, they took action on their goals. And then all of a sudden, the seeds started popping out. It's like the bamboo forests. They plant the seeds. First year, they water it every day, nothing happens. Second year, every day, nothing happens. Third year, fourth year, fifth year. In the fifth year, it shoots up 75 feet in a week period of time. Now, it wouldn't have shot up 75 feet if you didn't water it every day.
Exactly.
So keep watering your plants and keep watering your mind.
Wow. Peter.
Wow. Lots of good stuff. Listen, that last one right there was for me, but also I'm hoping it was for so many people. Keep watering those plants. Look, I don't have the best green thumb out there. I know how to water the plants.
Exactly.
Now, everything else, the pruning and everything like that, is challenging for me. But I wonder if we sometimes will do that one persistent thing, what it might materialize into. So thank you so much for sharing that there, Dr. Rick. We're getting close to time, so I want to make sure that that was my aha moment, that watering of the plant, that consistency, that discipline, and continuing to do the things that sometimes you can't even see all the way to the end, but you're continuing to do those things. In this case, of course, surrounding yourself with the right people, meeting with them, focusing on that goal of an objective and writing it down as you continue to move forward. Dr. Rick gave a fabulous examples, plural, of how that works and what that might look like in someone's life, but also now your life, those of you who are watching. What does that look like in your life? What does watering that plant regularly need to look like? Hey, folks, my name is Dr. Peter A. James. I am the high performance coach helping you to shift your mindset. You can find me primarily on shiftyourmindset.com. However, you can also find me on LinkedIn, which is my preferred social media platform. Please don't hesitate to connect. And those of you who are interested in your next level, we just finished up a phenomenal for 1 week of the Own Your Career Challenge. Our next iteration is coming up in November. You can find it at shiftyourmindset.com/own your career challenge, where if you are thinking about your next level, if you are thinking about how to water that plant in your career, this may be your thing. So definitely check us out. Check me out on LinkedIn. And Ann McNeil, right back to you.
Well, I do want to give Dr. Rick the last word. I want to say thank you, Laura Jackson, and also Karen Laverne Blackwood, for your comments in the chat. Actually, and I'll just read, Laura said, thank you for your wisdom this morning, confirmation that I'm doing some things right, family, passing it on, and motivation to do more. Looking forward to growing. And Laverne says, persistence will get you there. Consistency will keep you there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And everybody who's listening in, Doretha shared Masterminders having technical, she was having technical difficulties, but so many of you have just been so consistent in joining us. I want to encourage all of you, if you're listening and you're wondering what in the world are they talking about, and you would like to know more about masterminding and how to, I would strongly suggest that you get a copy of my book, of course, entitled How to Start and Run a Successful Mastermind Group, in addition to the workbook, because Dr. Rick has just shared with us the power of accountability, the power of consistency, but also the power of leveling up in your mastermind group. If you are in a group with individuals who are not like-minded and not like-spirited, and you think you're the smartest person in that group, shift. To use Dr. Peter's word, shift, not just your mindset, but shift your group, because whether it's for free or fee, it's not worth the time invested, because the time is not being invested, it's been spent. And so in order to really get the most, I'm enjoying reading U Squared, talking about the quantum leap. And you cannot have a quantum leap in your life and or your business if you're not surrounding yourself with quantum people. And that is what I'm learning in leveling up my own business and my own life, and starting to operate in spaces and places that is at such a high level that I would never have dreamed, Dr. Rick, years ago when I started on this journey, that it would be possible. But again, aligning myself with individuals like you and so many of our friends with the National Speakers Association, we could do another podcast just on that subject alone because of what we've gotten. I host a $1 million mastermind with Black NSA now for almost 13 years. And I want to give a shout out to Marquessa Petway and so many other people. Our new leader now is Lethea Owens. But we, in this mastermind, Black NSA, and for those of you that's interested, please go to the website and check us out. It is called blacknsaspeaker.org is the website. But I have been moderating a Think and Grow Rich mastermind there twice a year. We first started, it was 3 times a year. But Dr. Rick, when I tell you that people are making millions by setting those goals in 10-week increments, it has just been inspiring and profitable. Some have come not once or twice, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. They keep coming back, going back to your point of leveling up your mastermind accountability. But you can go to blacknsaspeaker.org. Our next cohort starts actually this Monday, which would be the 23rd of September, 2024. Again, my name is Ann McNeil, and if you'd like to connect with me, you can text the number 59925. That number again is 59925, and just put the word Ann in the chat. That's my name, ANN. You can put that in the chat, and in return, you will get my 6-point business plan that I've created and executed from utilizing these principles. I've created 5 businesses masterminding. And when I tell each of you that connect with Dr. Peter, connect with Dr. Rick, if you expect to find like-minded and like-spirited individuals, you will not be disappointed. So Dr. Rick, I'm going to yield to you to give us any closing comments or thoughts about the podcast today. And I just want to encourage all of you, continue to think and grow richer. Dr. Rick?
Well, I want to thank you guys for these great comments that I just heard. And I think the one thing that everybody can do in order to make themselves more successful is just be consistent in listening and watching this podcast, because it's going to right you. It's going to get you focused. It's going to put the blinders on you. And you're going to hear one thing. I always say to people, they go to a conference and they take down all these ideas and they don't use any. So I look for one, maybe two ideas that I'll implement, because the world's made up of great starters and lousy finishers. I always say there's someone that has an exercise bicycle sitting in their basement with clothes hanging on it, because that's just what happens. But if you can be consistent and persistent in watching the podcast, and sometimes going back and watching it twice, because you're going to hear something different based on where your mind is at that point in time. And, they always say when the student's ready, the teacher appears. So if you want to be consistent, stay watching this podcast. Some of them, you got a good idea, listen to it over. You may be in a different space, and now all of a sudden you're going to hear something a little bit different. But the principles are all the same. Stay focused, set your goals, take action on your goals, have an accountability team around you that's going to keep you focused when it's going good and when it's going not so good, because you're going to come out of it. But it's all about, if you stay in the race and you keep going forward, you'll get through the storm and you'll come out, and it's going to be sunshine, just like you're in the Wizard of Oz, and you won't believe how you got there.
All right, everybody, have a great day. Thank you all for joining us. And remember to continue to think and grow richer. Have a great day.
Thank you.